Hello and welcome to another episode of the Classic Chloe Show. We talk about music and its effects on every aspect of our daily lives. I'm your host, Chloe Castillo, and I have some fantastic guests for you today. Jonathan Saenz is the president of Texas Values, a nonprofit group dedicated to preserving and advancing a culture of family values in the state of Texas. Shiloh Satterfield's story began 8 years ago at just 10 years old as she testified at the Texas Capitol after a boy began using the girls' restroom at her school. Now, a senior in Dripping Springs High, she's still fighting for women's privacy in Texas. Jonathan and Shiloh, welcome to the show. Great to have you guys.
To be
Hi,
on.
it's nice to be here.
Awesome. So I'm really excited about this discussion. So Shiloh, I heard about you actually through my aunt, and she was like, "There's this girl, and she is such a huge fighter, and she's so young. She's just 18 years old." And she was like, "You've got to talk to her because, she's familiar with my fight as far as culture and music goes." And so she was like, "You know what? You two have to talk." And so I called Shiloh, and we had a great discussion, and we just really had this a really Shiloh just had a very mature understanding of how culture impacts politics and how it has impacted her fight, I would say. And so I just had to have her on the show. And so Jonathan, I believe I actually met you. You probably have no recollection of this whatsoever. In 2023, y'all had Riley Gaines and I forget who else was there speaking, but at the Texas Capitol, testifying and talking about men and women's sports. You had a whole rally. I think it was like the Texas Family Values, like Family Day or something like that. And it was a fantastic time. And I remember that you guys are real fighters. And I was like, these people are really awesome. So when I learned that Shiloh was involved through Texas Values, I was like, well, this is amazing. I had to talk to both Jonathan and Shiloh. So I appreciate you guys coming on the show today. So I just want to kind of dive into the whole music discussion here and play Shiloh's video from her Texas Values segment here. And just to give you guys a little bit of an idea of what she's been fighting for about, like, what, 8 years now? Let's go ahead and play that clip.
Hello, my name is Shiloh Satterfield. I am a senior at Dripping Springs High School. I am currently 18 years old, but I was just 10 years old when I recognized the privacy issue at my school district and felt the need to speak up. Even then, I felt the relevancy of this situation, not just for me, but to the girls around me. So my father took me to the Texas Capitol, and there I testified, petitioning for safety and privacy for girls and women in restrooms. And yet, here I am, 8 years later, still fighting for the exact same thing. At 10, the issue seemed very simple. The idea of biological men in women's restrooms and locker rooms made me feel uncomfortable. I told legislators that I wouldn't feel comfortable with even my own brother being in the same restroom as me as I showered, with a curtain between us. The same goes for a bathroom stall. How could it make sense that a grown man, a complete stranger, be allowed into a space meant to protect women? I believed that if something was so clearly a violation of women's safety and privacy, the law was there to fix it. But now, as I stand here on the verge of graduating high school, Texas still has no law protecting women's and girls' restrooms, showers, and locker rooms. 8 years later, and the fight still isn't over. The truth is, when I was younger, the idea of men in women's restrooms made me uneasy. Now, as someone almost closer to having kids than being one, the idea makes me angry. It makes me terrified, for I feel outraged for the safety and privacy of women and girls, and terrified for the future that we are setting for the next generation. The biology is simple. Although they may identify as female, transgender women are biologically, physiologically, and anatomically male. Now, this isn't to say that those transgender women don't need their own safe spaces. However, these spaces are not women's spaces. To say that they are not only impedes on the safety and privacy of biological women and girls, but also sets a dangerous and quite frankly offensive precedent that women's spaces are not only open for invasion, but not worth protection. I think with the current political climate, it's very easy to forget that just over 100 years ago, women didn't have a place in politics. They did not have a voice, and they did not have a vote. We had to hope and pray that our lawmakers' values aligned with ours, that we were being properly advocated for. Now, we don't have to hope. I can stand here before you and plead with you to hear the voices that are telling you that they feel unsafe and angry and scared, for not just themselves, but the future generation. Because that is the blunt truth of it. Women and girls will not only be uncomfortable, but more importantly, feel unsafe without protection of biological men in women's spaces. To have a legislative system that lacks proper legislation protecting women is not only negating the years of work we have put into giving ourselves voices, but it's also putting millions of young women and young girls into dangerous situations that you have the power to prevent. Texas currently has 3 bills that, if passed, can keep men out of women's locker rooms, showers, bathrooms, and safe spaces. House Bill 239 by Representative Valerie Swanson, House Bill 229 by Representative Chuck Clare, and Senate Bill 240 by Senator Mays Middleton, the Women's Privacy Act. I urge you, with the support of Texas values and millions of Texans behind me, to pass these bills. As legislative representatives, I urge you to advocate for us, for the millions of women and little girls that you will put in dangerous situations should you not pass this need to legislation. Protect them. Advocate for them. Pass the Women's Privacy Act. The time to act is now. The safety of our communities depend on it. Thank you.
We support the Texas Privacy Act to protect the privacy, safety, and dignity of all children in the state of Texas.
We support, and you should too.
So I think I love that little last part of the clip, was my favorite. But all jokes aside here, I mean, that's so well said. And it really amazes me, Shiloh, that you've been fighting this for 8 years. And to me, that raises a concern as someone that's always looking at, not just the political side of things, but the cultural side of things. And by culture, I mean entertainment and what we've grown accustomed to in our everyday society and what we consume, what we accept as normal. It's fascinating that you at 10 years old were out there fighting this and advocating for, sanity basically as a little girl. And then all this time later, you're now graduating high school and we're in the same boat. And yes, we have Trump as president now. Yes, he's passing executive orders, and yes, or he's signing executive orders rather. And, we're passing bills and we're still fighting this. But it just begs a question, in my opinion. What is happening that we have lost such a complete grip on our entertainment culture? Why does the left always have the grasp there? Why are all of our entertainers, all of our musicians, you look at what's her name? Chapel Roan, Pink Pony Club. It seems like a very simple song. It's going around the internet everywhere right now. And, people would use it on like the clips of little girls and it's just like sweet and cute. Well, the song's actually about how the artist herself actually, she said she was raised Christian, and Pink Pony Club came to be her song when she was at this gay bar. I forget if it was in Los Angeles or New York, something like that. And she said she felt the Holy Spirit for the first time there through the drag performers and through the transgenders and through all of that. And so it makes me think, what are these values that we are instilling in the youth of America through something as simple and fun and innocent as music that we all listen to every day? What is the mainstream doing to us? So Jonathan, let me ask you first, what are your thoughts on how this is impacting things like Shiloh's fight?
Well, first, I just want to say Shiloh did such a great job in that video. And I was smiling at the end because, I remember working with her at such a young age and how just impressed I was and really in many ways inspired to work harder to see such a young lady and her father standing beside her. My daughter's very similar to the same age. I have a daughter who's 15 years old. And so I, experienced these dynamics in my own home. And I know what it's like as a father and as a man to be in that role as a protector. And I also know, though, when young people step forward for these common sense values, a lot of times, the media is not very kind to them. And, it was so pure. I mean, it's not as if we drove out to Dripping Springs and went looking for some, young girl who was 10 years old. She was involved in this before we even came along at a school board meeting in Dripping Springs. She was already working on this issue with her father. But she understood at a young age, as her father did, the opportunity to really speak out and speak for other young people in these positions. Most of the kids won't. They got to walk down the aisle and the halls of their public schools if they speak out, right? I mean, and we know how that can be. I mean, high school students can be very unkind sometimes. The rumors, the gossips, the jeers. I mean, all those kind of things, and to really stand out for something that maybe people aren't always talking about in their age. And so it's been an honor. And not only that, I mean, Shiloh was an intern for us last summer. She's continued to stay engaged in this issue and work with us and show that it is something that's, very important to her. And she's continued to find ways to make herself available and learn more about the process and be involved. And her voice has gone even further because of that. Look, the culture, the entertainment industry, I think much of that is focused on, really this concept of me, right? And individual issues, and a focus, you look at social media these days and some of these things, it's really, who can be the most extravagant, who can stand out in some way that gets people's attention. And so I think some of it is that, people are going to these extreme measures to do things and to have music and, art that goes along with it, so to speak, that can be so sensational, but also it can go even further to just be incredibly inappropriate and just over the top, to where, they're pushing the boundaries, they're blurring the lines from a lot of things. And a lot of these people are young, though, right? They don't have a family, they don't have kids. And sometimes that does change your perspective when you realize what is all at stake, and some of the elements that are really important to raising children and to preparing them to be the next generation of leaders in our culture and society. And so I wish that's something that could come to people's minds at much an earlier age.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's very true that it does hit home for a lot of young people, these issues like the pro-life movement, and which actually I remember who else was there at that event where I was with you guys a long time ago. It was Abby Johnson and stories
Abby
like that,
Johnson, yeah,
yeah,
Riley
people.
Gaines. It was a great lineup.
Yeah, and people really, I think those are really powerful stories, and it impacts them personally, and a lot of young people are impacted personally by these sort of issues. And so, Shiloh, let me ask you, as a young person, we talked about music for probably a really long time on the phone, but as a young person who's very familiar with what's going around in, the mainstream music, just, being the age that you are, I'm in the same boat here. What kind of impact do you think this is having on our generation? What do you think the youth of America, and younger too, the next generation as well, as they're growing up, what is becoming normal in their eyes, do you think, through this sort of entertainment?
Honestly, I think it's twofold. Either they choose to go against the norm, and it's, they have a strong opinion on one political side or another, and I think that's definitely influenced by music, or they're desensitized to it. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that I've seen is just the desensitization of the I don't want to say vulgarity, but just the like hard hitting aspects that we should be not sensitized to. They should strike us and affect us. They aren't affecting us because in every aspect of our culture, be it, music or TV or film, any aspect of the entertainment industry is not only a reflection of what we think is okay, but it influences what we think is okay. So, I think in at least my personal life, it's been a lot of just recognizing, oh, I'm desensitized to this. Oh, I have to recognize, I have to think about, this, and this is wrong, even though every single aspect outside of, my faith and my family is telling me otherwise. So I think that's a big thing. And I think people underestimate kids. And I think they still can hold their own strong, moral, political, whatever you want to call it, values. Um, but entertainment is, weaved into every aspect of our life. So, whether what we're taking in, I think we, in some way or another, put out, so I think it's just interesting how desensitized we as a generation, at least, like my, high school friends have become to the issues that we see, um, so prevalently in media and music and that kind of thing.
So well said. And I was watching someone the other day, I believe it was on Jaco Booyens. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's a very fantastic voice for the whole human trafficking industry, standing up against that. He's an amazing guy. And he had someone on his show, and he was talking about how the youth, the young people that are being exposed to sex ed as early as kindergarten, that it actually has a detrimental effect on their brain and how it processes things, how it actually works. And he was saying that that's, or his guest rather was saying that's not normal and it's having a terrible effect on these young people who are being exposed way too early on to agendas like LGBTQ ideology and, and all these issues. And again, desensitized in a way, like Charlotte was just saying, which I think is such a good way to put that. And also, you mentioned basically you are what you consume. I think that's so true. What you put in is going to come out in some way, shape, or form. Like you are your five closest friends. I mean, it definitely applies. And so it made me think though, this show I was watching, when you see in the music, so think, the school system, for example, they're putting in this material that's extremely inappropriate. It's not, it's not advancing the minds of the young people, in our society. So what about the music? We look at the schools because that's where the kids specifically are, it's supposed to be for kids, it's kid friendly, it's school for them. And people will say, well, concerts with people like Sabrina Carpenter, for example, aren't exactly for the youth. Well, that may be true, but I have to tell you, you have 12-year-olds and younger going to these concerts, and that's who is consuming this culture. Yes, it's older people as well, but it's a vast majority of the youth. Like you said, they're desensitized to it. It's normal to them, and seeing anything wrong with it, they have to go out of their way to recognize that anything is amiss here. And so when you see these concerts where girls are holding up these big 69 signs in the audience, and you have Sabrina Carpenter showing all these different sex poses on stage while she asks her very young audience, have you ever tried this one? And the whole audience screams and they're going wild. You have to wonder, is that having an effect? I mean, to me, it's obvious that it is. And so, what are y'all's thoughts? I mean, do you think that I'm overreacting here? Do you think that that's really having an effect more than anyone's really considered before? What do you guys think?
One
Actually, I'll
thing
ask
I want to
Jonathan first.
mention
Sorry.
too that we don't lose sight of is the upside of social media, the internet, technology is it allows young people to have a connection with other forms of art and music that affirm their values, that affirm their faith. My daughter recently went to a Lauren Daigle concert, right? That is, she's a Christian artist, faith-based lyrics that I think a lot of people are comfortable with, that care about the values that we do, that are Christian and so on. And there are other examples of that too, where you have a lot of young people, male and female, that get involved in the arts, that get involved in music, and can do that and still do it in a way that supports their values and supports their Christian values, if that's the case. And it doesn't have to be these other type of lyrics and what you see in mainstream, if you will. And so, I mean, look, there are 20,000 people at this arena where Lauren Daigle performed, and I'm pretty sure that it was a sellout, and so I do think that's encouraging, but sometimes you have to put a little bit more effort to direct kids to those things, because that might not be some of the type of music that comes in front of them or enters their headphones or whatever they hear first. And so, and I just, again, I was talking about this earlier, just a lot of the things that surround or around kids these days for them to sort of sort through and figure out. But I agree, Shiloh's point about the desensitizing is dead on. That is what you see. And the more that kids are exposed to it at a younger age, the more that they're going to think that it's not an issue or it's not problematic, or they're going to feel like they're encouraged to experiment with some of these things. The other part of this that is so concerning, that means it's likely that some of these kids are going to be the victim of a sexual assault. They're not going to realize at first that this is wrong. Some of them are going to think, oh, well, maybe it was my fault, because maybe I thought it was okay. Or for a moment, it seemed like it was nice, because they're kids. They don't understand what's going on or the impact of it. That is what some people want to do. They want to desensitize things so much. They want to, they want to put these sex education courses into kids at such an early age, because they would like to benefit, if you will, from more of that type of behavior, where they can have access to these kids. They can prey upon them and do awful things to them. And so now, look, there may be some people that's not their agenda, but they're a part of this movement, if you will, and these efforts that results in that. So, I mean, in my opinion, they can be held just as accountable for some of these negative outcomes. And so we do talk about that sometimes. You will hear reports about the connection to sex trafficking and things of that nature. But I think it can be difficult for young boys, but particularly for young girls, it can be even much more difficult. And so the more that, we're delaying the time of talking about those things and talking about other things. We'll get to those topics. Kids will get to those topics as young as adults at some point. I think it's best for them to have those conversations with their parents. And I mean, with all the public schools I see in Texas that are having problems, hitting the mark on, on math and science and, reading and writing, they're spending way too much time with all these political agendas and over sexualizing kids. And sadly, we're seeing some really negative consequences of that. But a lot has to do with what happens in our state law. We're in the middle of our state legislative session. The video mentioned that Senate Bill 240, a bill that we're trying to pass to protect women's privacy and girls' privacy in showers, locker rooms, and bathrooms. So a lot of times having a state law that says, here are our standards, and they're not negotiable. So all the 1,200 school districts in Texas and so on, this is what you have to follow. And so I'm encouraged that young ladies like Shiloh have come forward, and they're a part of that movement. They're a part of that effort. We're going to find out in a couple of weeks when the legislative session ends in Texas where we are on these issues. But that's how people can make a difference.
Absolutely. I think it's a really important combination. I think when it comes to law and state law, and when it comes to policy, and also when it comes to, what is out there for the youth to consume. I think when you combine the two, when as conservatives, we really make sure we're covering all of our bases there, we have an incredibly strong, much stronger nation that, represents American or, traditional American values. So I could not agree with you more. So Shiloh, we have about 2 minutes on the clock left here. So if you can give some last thoughts. I truly appreciate you coming on, by the way. I think this is fantastic to get someone as young as you who really understands this concept and who really is willing to speak out is just incredibly important. So thank you for that. But give my audience some last thoughts. As a young person, what do you think needs to happen to shift the culture in the direction that, aligns with these kind of policies that we're trying to push forward in our state capital?
Gosh, that's a big question. I think the shift in a culture is something that is so nuanced that I couldn't even begin to tell you where to begin. But I think when in regards to music and the entertainment industry, I think that yes, it has an effect on the culture and it has effect on the minds and hearts of, young individuals, and I mean even people my age. But I also think that there is a way to separate, yourself and what you're consuming and your morals and all of it. So I think that just recognizing it is probably the first step, at least in my personal life. It's recognizing I can listen to this, but this isn't something that I would necessarily subject someone younger than me to, or it's something that I can listen to but not necessarily agree with. You know what I mean? It's stuff that, especially because we live in such a polarized time right now, every single thing that I consume, it feels like it has some sort of agenda or some sort of, moral or political or religious, something behind it. So I think being able to recognize that and being self-aware, I feel like self-awareness is something we've really lost, just as a society, not being able to look at either the media or the music or whatever we're consuming, or if it's something different, like the conversations we're having. I think there is such value in being able to look at them and recognize them for what they are. You know what I mean? The background of the person saying them, the morals of the person writing the song. You know what I mean? It's something that we just have to be aware of, because I think that making ourselves aware of the situation is the first step. Because I think we take in a lot of things subconsciously, but if you make that conscious, if you make the conscious choice to be like, I understand exactly what this is, and I can take it in different ways, you know what I mean? I don't know, that's what I would say.
Attention American business owners, big or small, your company deserves to be seen, and Patriot TV is here to help. We're proud to support American-owned businesses by offering a free listing of your company on Patriot TV Store. That's right. No cost, just visibility to millions of loyal viewers who want to support American businesses like yours. Whether you run a small business or a nationwide company, this is your chance to reach a dedicated audience on Patriot TV Store on major smart TVs like Samsung, LG, Sony, TCL, Roku, also on Apple, Android, Amazon, Fire Stick, YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, Truth Social, X, and of course, the Patriot TV Store app and website. It's our way of giving back to the community and helping American businesses thrive. Let's work together to build a stronger America. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity. Get your free business listing today. Contact us at info@patriot.tv.
Think you need a new roof? Think again. Roofs aren't made like they used to be. They have significantly less asphalt in them than they did 20 years ago. That's causing roofs to wear out way before they should. Roof Max can extend the life of your roof for at least 5 and up to 15 years, guaranteed. 9 out of 10 roofs qualify. Restore your roof at a fraction of the cost for a new roof. Mention Patriot TV and get their $859 roof tune-up for free. Call 1-800-ROOF-MAX. I love it. Thank y'all so much for coming on. And Charlotte, you want to go ahead real quick?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think 100% that has an effect. Having a father that has instilled these values in me has been so helpful. But I also think that it's so important to separate yourself from the, ideals that you're taught and find your own reason, meaning behind it, and, what you use to justify it. Because at least with me, having these conversations with people, people that agree with me and people that disagree with me, I think I'm recognizing that a lot of people don't think for themselves. They think in the way that media or music or TV or their parents or their community tell them to, and I think that's dangerous. Is becoming, a sheep just led through life with an opinion that you're just given is so dangerous. And so I think that, yes, having, amazing parents that have really guided me and given me those values is helpful. But I think learning to, stand on my own and stand firm in my values, regardless of what, people come at me with, has been invaluable in at least this aspect of my life. Because, being able to not care whether, I think having genuine and kind conversations is so important, but there also has to be, you can't be a pushover. You know what I mean? There has to be a firmness that you have to be willing to stand your ground. And I think that's so important. And it's at least helpful
So well said, Shai.
in this.
Absolutely. So well said. And thank you both so much for coming on here. I truly appreciate this discussion. I think it's incredibly important, and I really value both of your opinions on this. So great to have you, Jonathan and Shiloh. Hope to have you back on the show maybe later, and maybe we have something passed in Texas that'll actually protect this. Maybe we can have some more music out there that actually aligns these values as well. So thank you all so much for coming on. Where can my audience find you guys?
Well, my website is txvalues.org, like the state of Texas, or texasvalues.org. And then I'm on social media. Just, my name's not all that common. So if you search for it, you'll probably find it. But on X, I'm at Jonathan Saenz TX.
Perfect.
I'm really on Instagram, ShilohLeo7, but I repost all the things. I repost Texas value stuff a lot, honestly, and I repost, not as much political things, but the things that I, feel strongly about. I think it's important to get that message out there.
Perfect. Thank y'all so much for coming on. God bless you both.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. Please subscribe to the Classically Chloe Show on Rumble, YouTube, and Spotify. Please also follow me at classically_Chloe on Instagram and Classically Chloe on all their platforms. See you next week. God bless.